Hello everyone and welcome to lesson 41, where I'm going to introduce to you an issue, an error that I see in, I promise you, 99% of the documents that I encounter, both in my work, online, in magazines, in advertisements, wherever it might be. I guarantee you 99% of the time there is an error about this issue, about how people use common abbreviations and how that the use of common abbreviations should be uniform in a text. Okay, so what do I mean by common abbreviations? As you can see behind me here, I'm talking about the three most common abbreviations that you're likely to use. That is IE, EG, and IA. Okay, so IE and EG are probably going to be more common than IA, but if in legal writing in particular or business writing, you might be using IA quite a lot. So let me break this down. First of all, IE, what does it mean? It means that is to say, or in other words. That's what IE means. So if you're not familiar with the meaning of IE, and some people use IE and EG interchangeably, which is of course something that you shouldn't do. So if you're not sure what IE means, this is what it means. Please do not use the Latin form id est. Okay, it doesn't make you look cleverer, it doesn't make you look more sophisticated, it just looks strange and old-fashioned. So please don't use id est. But that is, of course, the original Latin translation. EG, what does EG mean? Easy peasy, for example, or some kind of alternative such as. Please, and I don't think I've seen this in a number of years, but in case you're tempted, once again, for exactly the same reasons that you wouldn't write down id est, please don't write down exempli gratia. I think that's how you pronounce it, maybe not. Please don't write down the original Latin form. It's not going to score you any points. It's just going to confuse the reader and make you look like an old piece of furniture. Not good. And then lastly, IA, which means among others or among other things. Once again, please don't use the Latin inter alia, okay? Just use the abbreviated form. Now, why is this an issue? Well, now I'm going to focus on the work that I do as a proofreader and as a copy editor. I generally work with longer documents, and in those longer documents, the authors use these abbreviated forms quite a lot. And one thing that irritates me more than anything else is the lack of uniformity or consistency. So sometimes they will say IE, sometimes they will say that is to say, sometimes they will say in other words in the same document. And for me, I can't see the sense of that. I don't want to say it's a lack of professionalism because I think that would be going too far. But it is a lack of consistency, and for people with OCD like I have sometimes as regards English language issues, it does stand out and it does irritate. So I'm going to assume that there are some people in the world who are a bit like me that will want to avoid this problem in the reading that they do. So for me, it's more professional to keep consistency, keep uniformity, use those abbreviated forms which everyone understands, as opposed to using an alternative form which people might not understand. So for example, IA is easier to understand than among others, which can be quite difficult when you just think about the vocabulary literally. This also applies to comma use. So do you put, as you can see here, do you put the comma before the abbreviated form or after the abbreviated form? Now, this depends on whether you follow the British style or the American style. Whichever style you follow, make sure that you are consistent. There's nothing worse in a document to read these abbreviated forms and find commas absolutely all over the place, okay? It's not a good look. So be consistent with that. Better still, create your own style guide or ask if the company that you work for has a style guide. What does the company prefer in terms of presentation of information? Should the comma be before? Should the comma be after? Or indeed, does the company or you yourself personally, if you're creating a style guide, prefer to just keep one form? So using the abbreviated form or using one of the other forms. Okay, so let's have a look at an example. You need to be, for example, quite active in the meeting. In a sentence this short, putting in for example in the long form looks a little bit strange. It's a little bit cumbersome. It looks almost as if it's a little bit out of place. It might be an example of you're writing how you are speaking, which I've said in previous videos is not always the best idea. So if we're writing, how can we redraft this? Well, we've got a couple of options. We can either say you need to be, e.g., quite active in the meeting, or we might just look at the text and just decide we don't need to say that. It might be something that we say when we're speaking, but if we're writing, it's adequate simply just to not use anything at all and say, you need to be quite active in the meeting, full stop. Okay, so here are the teaching tips. Consistency in use equals certainty from the point of the reader. The reader knows what to expect, the reader learns your style, the reader knows what you're trying to communicate. Consistency in use is professionalism. Using 10 different ways to say the same thing, which is the same thing which isn't the most important message in your writing, I would argue is not the most professional way to write, and it might lead to confusion. Indeed, if you're looking for what I call elegance through variation, so if you're looking to avoid repetition, then avoid repetition in your main message, not in these abbreviated forms, okay? Look somewhere else to show off your writing skills. And once again, I say that with a note of caution because always remember about the reader. When you're writing, you're not showing off your Shakespearean skills, you're communicating a message. So I say that with an element of caution. Create a personal style guide if your company doesn't have one. Now, this is a fantastic idea. I've talked about this a number of times in my videos. If you create a small style guide and put it by your monitor, so you constantly are able to identify the mistakes that you make, the things that you perhaps can eliminate from your writing. So I've done a number of videos about redundant words that you don't need to use, and things like this. How do I use, for example? If you keep that by your monitor, then you will always referring to it and it introduces consistency in your writing. Now, I know you might be thinking that I'm a little bit finicky and perhaps my OCD is coming through, but this is a simple rule and I think it has a disproportionate effect, a benefit on your writing. The consistency that you have throughout your writing actually makes the reader feel quite comfortable, and that is an important effect if you're trying to persuade the reader. Okay, time for questions, and if you're supporting me on Patreon, you'll be able to download those questions, and of course you'll be able to get access to my answer videos. If you're following me on social media, YouTube, Facebook and LinkedIn, then please think about supporting me on Patreon, where you're going to get access to all of my videos a lot faster, and of course you'll get access to the questions and my answer videos. So if you're doing my questions, I'd like you to read the sentences below the questions and change the relevant vocabulary into an abbreviated form. I want you to start developing these good habits. And I'm going to give you lots of different ways. I'm not going to make this that simple for you. I'm going to give you lots of different ways, lots of different forms that people use that I've seen in the writing that I've analyzed, the writing that I've checked, instead of using these simple abbreviated forms. So, for example, if you can't understand the text, that is to say there's too much legalese, let me know. Okay? This should be, if you can't understand the text, i.e. there's too much legalese, let me know, or think about the message and decide whether you need to say this. You might decide to redraft it like this. If you can't understand the text because there's too much legalese, let me know.